floor to our brothers from the Belize Progressive Party. You have the floor. 35.
Thank you. It sure is a pleasure to be here, to be able to put forth the BPP alternatives. So certainly in an effort to not duplicate what the good ambassadors have done and what our brothers from the VIP have done, I will be scanning over some of these slides pretty quickly, just making some references to it. So basically we're saying no to the ICJ, yes to the UN Security Council. No to ICJ ratification by the Senate, which is the matter that the good ambassador alluded to, which I will be touching on a little bit. No to the ICJ referendum at section 7.1, no to land and insular territory being introduced in the referendum question at 7.3, and no to this route that we're on that basically was charted by Article 33.1 of the United Nations Charter. So we're saying there is another route for Belize to take. And at the completion of my presentation, hopefully that you all will understand the logic to not go under 33.1, which is from the chapter 6 of the UN articles, when you're about to settle disputes pacifically, peaceful, when you're under peace terms. However, when you're not under peace terms, the UN offers us some other articles, beginning with Article 39, which comes under chapter 7, which is action with respect to the threats of the peace, breaches of the peace, and acts of aggression. So at the completion of my presentation, I hope to impress upon you all that not only are we going down the wrong road, but we need to recalibrate and come, when I say wheel up and come again, make we go, but not under 33.1, under 39. So what exactly is Guatemala's position? Well, if I may read from a statement of 2001, Guatemala's present position is to reclaim all the territory of the province of Verapaz. Now, for clarity, Verapaz is that section you're seeing in red over there, that 12,000, whatever it breaks down into, more than half of our country. And it basically go right up the south side, Belize City, we're part either. So yes, I'm very concerned about this issue because, you know, I might have to get a Guatemalan passport or decide to be Mexican. But continue reading. Held by Belize, including the islands and adjacent sea. These latter having been explicitly excluded by the Anglo-Spanish treaties of 1783 and 1786, and which were not included in the British-Guatemalan Treaty of 1859. So, moving along, understanding how we consolidated this settlement. As Brother Morgan alluded to, there's this thing called colonization norms, which is before 1960, right? Everything that happened from history up to 1960 would be considered colonization norms. So there's 5 things that were considered normal under colonization time. The first one, of course, is right of conquest, where if I could beat you, I just pull from your territory, conquer you, and there's nothing you can do with it. You sign one treaty, in that treaty you surrender the territory and you cede it to me. So of course, well, his story says, our story is that in 1798, the Baymen conquered this. Not the British, but the Baymen, and we expand on that a little. European powers war and conquer territories from each other. Now, a second norm under colonization is this thing called succession, where the European colonies, upon receiving independence, they claim this thing called utiposity, which is to say, I inherited from Spain whatever that was based on this 1493 treaty from, when you see the series, the Borgias, Pope Alexander, right? So the claim of succession goes all the way back to 1821 for Guatemala, where she said she succeeded from Spain, and so she got the Verapaz province, although Spain never effectively occupied Verapaz province. She claims it based on succession. Now, there's a third norm under colonization time called acquisitive prescription, which is to say that the British, I mean, old squatters' right term, right, with them might, then could go and just squat, and after a while get you to the table and you acquisite to their taking over your territory. Acquisitive prescription. So the British in their time got Guatemala to the table in 1859 and they got them to sign the boundary treaty, which is saying Guatemala was acquisite to them laying out the boundaries of this country. Fourth norm is historical consolidation. So here we're saying effective state management. You get out there, you had your border from 1859, you never demark it yet. You go and you demark the border. So in 1931, again under British rule, we were showing effective statehood, controlling this thing to get our borders demarcated. But here's the problem, brothers and sisters. There's a fifth colonization norm that nobody likes to talk about. And this is the matter where territories were gotten through compensation. I mean, you have the US with the Philippines war, even though they defeated the Spanish, they still compensated the Spanish 15 million for the Philippines possession and stuff. But they also compensated France, 1804, for the Louisiana Purchase. So that was a norm in colonization time of how you consolidate your territory. Now, after 1960, when the UN pushed through decolonization norms, starting in 1960 with Resolution 1540, the dynamics changed. Every member state that was accepted into the UN, their boundaries were already defined based on those colonization norms that had occurred before the UN was even birthed. So, in the case of Belize, we don't want to, as Mr. Morgan said, one of the UN picked me, one of the UN baby. We got our independence based on the UN putting down its foot and telling Europe, it's time to give independence to your colonies. So I feel like England may just want to give we independence. You saw all of the CARICOM brothers, right? Jamaica, Trinidad, Guyana, Barbados, all of them got their independence before 1966. Belize is still banned because of the threat from Guatemala, and it took for another 20 years before Belize got its independence in 1980, as Resolution 3520 mandated that we did. Now, there's two other norms since decolonization. This is the option that the VIP alluded to, that is the BPP's position, that is an option that is not being considered. That it is normal for countries that have been accepted into the United Nations with existing borders, whenever those borders are trampled upon by a neighbor, brothers and sisters, that is what the United Nations Security Council is all about reestablishing existing borders as they were at the time of your entrance as a member into the United Nations. So this option has never been discussed, and no matter how we've been hollering, yelling from 2008, there are alternatives, Belize. There are alternatives. The media blanket us out. I've heard from the good ambassador that they actually did 100 presentations with only the yes to the ICJ. That is a disservice they're doing to Belize. And now they're begging in Istanbul for more money and London in more money to continue the education process. I'm saying not without the VIP and the BPP at the table, good ambassador. This is about Belize. And our message is a very real message that is based on facts that needs to be brought out into the discourse. So having said that, we're saying this is where Belize needs to go to reestablish our borders under Article 39, not following 33.1 as we've been doing that have led us to this ICJ with the compromise as it stands. So there you go, the next norm, right? ICJ, rule on delineating maritime boundaries. So all in 59 cases they talk about that have been to the ICJ, yes, a few of them involve existing boundaries on the mainland, but that is the exception. The norm is that every country have border issues in a sea, maritime boundaries. Where are they at? The norm is for these countries to use the ICJ to do just that, to make one ruling on where your maritime boundaries exist. So we're saying, Belize, we're going down to the ICJ under Article 333.1. It's the wrong norm to be using in a decolonization time. We need to be under 39 because we already passed in 1992 a Maritime Areas Act that was supposed to have delineated our maritime boundaries. But a quick history to that is that when Jorge Serrano got back to Guatemala and said, I guess something we could stop claiming Belize now, then said, what were your instructions? Land, sea, and keys. Maritime Areas Act gave them seas and keys, right? In 9 miles of our territorial waters, where we only claim 3 miles. It's there. It's in the law. All the laws are here because I don't have the pretty printout like the good ambassadors, but on the internet you could get everything. So here, all the agreements. Here's the Maritime Areas Act. Act as in it's a law. The number bill before the House, it was made law. But all this did was give up 9 miles of territorial seas, and it gave up the free use of the Sapodilla and Ranguana key ranges. That was not sufficient. So when the president went to Guatemala thinking that he had sufficient to offer his Congress so that they dropped the claim to Belize, they said, no, where is the land? Anyways, if they don't make it law, which they haven't, and we did, then we're saying maybe after the UN come in and put the peacekeeping force to give back Sarstone Island and the northern portion of the river, maybe then, if they don't want to pass that Maritime Areas Act, maybe then and only then would we recommend at the BPP for us to pursue the ICJ as an option to then demark the maritime areas, but not touch with land boundaries that we know exist, that have been there and marked out. So, moving along, a bit of history, how we got here. The first flag of Belize, as you know, the Mosquito Nation, the North Atlantic, the Atlantic coast of Nicaragua, one great mixed breed Maya, because the Maya effectively prevented the Spanish from taking possession of the Atlantic coast within the Caribbean, Western Caribbean. Spanish never possessed it. 1513 was the first attempt they made, and then one great Maya, the Corozal tongue, resisted them, and after 18 months, when they left, never came back. Opened the door now for this mixed breed, white as we call them, mosquito, who the British trade arms for provision, and with those arms, the Waika could have raid all the way Costa Rica, Colombia, all the way down to Yucatan. So by them being one mixed breed, they're not just one Maya, no one Lee Sharpman, a Maya African, a Maya European. They wage war on the Atlantic coast and effectively control Atlantic coast. Now, when the flags then fly out and rob the Spanish ship, 1763, the Spanish hurry jumped at the table with the British and said, man, logwood, make them guys that said, this on logwood and give up the Rabu ship. So they signed Wally Treaty. And then here is where the trick happened now, where the UK pirates turned buccaneers and brought Africans and Mosquito Indians to log, collectively known as the Baymen. So never think Samuel Haynes never know where they said. Baymen are because with a men from the Bay of Honduras. All right, they know one white Englishman. That the Mosquito Indian, the African slave, and the European man that were collectively known as the Baymen, that they fought and conquered this territory in 1798, and they effectively ruled themselves for 42 years under the sun through the public meeting. Of course, everybody knows every year at the public meeting, they vote for us, England, to put them under British administration. It's too costly to do that. A lot of administration, building, and things needed. So it wasn't until Guatemala broke free from the Republic and put their first claim on Belize in 1839 that the British made us one colony. So in 1840, well, just going back one little bit, 1763 to 1798, we were under what is called the Buccaneer Lagwooders. But at 1798, we conquered this territory, but we never conquered Honda to Sartú. We conquered the area that the Spanish had given us to log. So we go to 1859 treaty, where at that point now, the British had already effectively gone as far as, and listen to this carefully, where the waterfall and stop there, that's where the British encroachment ends. So after we Baymen got right to conquest to one portion of this territory, the British further consolidated it. Because remember, then got the might. Once you got the might, you just do what you want, and nobody could stop you. So the poor Guatemalans then were in a position in 1786 where they were being instructed by, the big hand up north, the Monroe Doctrine 1823, by 1815 Clayton Buller, the kicking to tell the UK, mommy, done your obstruct, stop the encroach on Guatemalan land number, and know that you're dead at them falls, because you can't go up the waterfalls So you stop the Gracias a Dios Falls, you stop the Garbutt's Falls, you stop the Aguas Falls, because the water stop you, the river stop you, no? Guatemalan military might. I know you did it. I am not in a position to give you sovereignty over territory that are not yours, that are not mine. You have to give up the Atlantic coast of Nicaragua, the Mosquito territory. You have to give it up. You have to give up the Garifuna territory where you got to settle at the Bay Islands to Honduras. But I cannot give you Sibun to Sarstoon because it is not mine to give. You need to get to the table with Guatemala and please, please, please remember to compensate them. You see, that was the trick. America knew that Guatemala needed compensation. Her position has always been, but I lose Verapaz. I never get the Bay Islands. I never get the Atlantic coast of Nicaragua. But I had to give up Verapaz. So that is why this dispute has never been able to settle, because in 1859, Article 7 was in effect a compensatory clause for this boundary treaty. So a bit of history quickly. 2 years after that, when the British and the Guatemalans agreed that they will get French and Spanish engineers, an architect to see the cost of building the Clark Road. The cost was £140,000. England never wanted to pay half of that. England offered to pay 50 a couple of years later, but given 6 months to take the deal. Guatemala got in a war with El Salvador. They got back to the table in 2 years, and what happened? England said, I have been exonerated. You never get back to me within the 6 months time period. And therein lies the genesis of the Anglo-Guatemalan dispute that could have been settled monetarily, you see? But we went along now like we so bad, and in 1980 when we got that fantastic resolution from the United Nations, we went ahead and we said, these are just some slides I run over. We went ahead and we said, we don't need England at the table to resolve this no more. We could handle this. We got this. And that is where we made a mistake, because everything the VIP presentation put forth is true, in that the UN gave us one special charter when they understood that the timeline they had given England to give its independence, which I mean 1 year, right? The ending of 1980, they said by the closing of the next session, you're supposed to give Belize its independence. So with England and Guatemala not settling this dispute, going into Belize getting its independence, they decided that, you know what, we, the UN, needs to guarantee Belize security. We, the UN, are prepared. This is what the guarantee is saying. We, the UN, through the Security Council, are prepared to guarantee Belize's territorial existence after independence, right? They knew what they were doing. They knew that England wasn't about to compensate Guatemala, and had they not give us that guarantee, leaving it for our leaders now to kick in that clause and go there to seek protection, bring in economic sanctions, if that not work, bring in the US peacekeeping forces, otherwise we're not to get back the island, and we're not to get back the northern portion of the river, right? So that treaty here, by the way, England had defeated Spain 1797. By 1802, the Spanish signed a surrender treaty to give up Trinidad and those territories. Let's leave it a backdrop to lead up to where we're at. This is the 1859 Dallas Calderon Treaty that I'm just going to read something quickly from, because here it's important to understand. This is on the backs of the 1850 Clayton Buller, right? Where they're basically saying, Mommy, if you never understand me clearly, understand me now. So this treaty basically said, one paragraph from it I'll read, that Her Britannic Majesty's settlement called the Belize or British Honduras on the shores of the Bay of Honduras, bounded on the north by the Mexican province of Yucatan, and the south by the river Sarstoon, and was not and is not embraced in the treaty entered into between the contracting parties on the 19th day of April 1850, and that the limits of the said Belize on the west, as they existed on that said 19th day, April 1850, shall, if possible, be settled and fixed by treaty between Her Britannic Majesty and the Republic of Guatemala within 2 years from the exchange of ratification of this instrument, which said boundaries and limits shall not at any time hereafter be extended. So you see, This treaty here, Dallas Calderon was explaining to England where Clayton Buller never get clear that, mommy, I know your border, Mexico and England never signed no treaty yet. But wherever the Yucatan end, the US knew that's Belize settlement northern border. They also knew that the south was at Sarstoon. But what was not clear is exactly where the western boundary is there. So the US instructed England to get one treaty within 2 years with Guatemala that will effectively set that western boundary. It took 3 years, but by 1859 now, you see our 1859 treaty coming about. So, now make no ghost fool you. Uncle Sam guy handing this thing every time. This basically they show the king of the Waika them. We bring them in, Bobby and I, in 2011 through an exchange. We want to learn more our story. We brought them in. We took them to meet all the Mayas in Belize and the Garifuna in Stanquist. Some beautiful exchanges that we learned a whole lot more about our story and seeing the connection between them, how much they're a part of us. But here you see 1968, the Webster proposal. As we said, these documents are important because it shows the genesis of what brought us to where we are today. And then, of course, today, since 2001, legal opinion on Guatemala's territorial claim to Belize. I call this them Bible, where the talking heads just go around and repeat out of his story. Will give you an understanding of what we did through his eyes and the lead we down this road to the ICJ, which is his plan for us, you see. So this book, this legal opinion, we're saying, you know what, the hogwash, as Mr. Morgan said, there's no precedent at the ICJ. And the former judges at the ICJ, you know, mean how them think that the way the new set of judges in there will think. Now, we have always maintained, without spending too much time, the UN General Resolution from 1975, which was the first of about 6 resolutions where they said it's time to basically give Belize its independence, England. At clause 1 above, it says, reaffirms the inalienable right of the people of Belize to self-determination and independence. At 2, it says, declare the inviolability and territorial integrity of Belize must be preserved. Let's jump down to 5. 5 says, declares that any proposal for the resolution of these differences of opinion that may emerge from the negotiations between the administering power and the government of Guatemala must be in accordance with the provisions of paragraph 1 and 2 above, which is to say then that the UN understood the Anglo-Guatemalan dispute could have been settled monetarily with Belize retaining its territory intact. There was no need for any territory to be given up because the UN was telling England and Guatemala, settle on a dispute without Belize, lose territory. This went on 76, 77, 78, 79. 1979, something big happened. Up at about halfway down this side, it says, recalling that the 6th Conference of Heads of State of Government of non-aligned countries held at Havana from the 3rd to the 9th of September 1979 reiterated its unconditional support for the Belizean people's inalienable right to self-determination, independence, and territorial integrity, and condemn all pressure or threats to prevent the full exercise of that right. You see, so Fidel Castro, as president of the non-aligned countries at the time, got to unblock a country about 70 to vote en masse, putting their foot down, saying, we're tired of the Korea 1976 to repeat the 1975 resolution. 77 to repeat 76, 78, 79. So by the time 1980 come now, they put their feet down. They passed this 1980 resolution saying, 1, reaffirm the inalienable right of the people of Belize to self-determination, independence, and territorial integrity, and urges all states to render all practical assistance necessary for the secure and early exercise of that right. 2, declares that Belize should become an independent state before the conclusion of the 36th session of the General Assembly. So that was the 35th session. They're saying by the next session, by December, you're supposed to get your independence. But, of course, as Brother Hubert pointed out, at clause 7, boom, that's the bomb, right? Where it says, request the relevant organs, like the UN Security Council of the United Nations, to take such actions as may be appropriate as may be requested by the administering power and the government of Belize in order to facilitate the attainment of independence by Belize and to guarantee its security and territorial integrity thereafter. Now, you think they don't know English? You think they don't know what they put when they put thereafter there? Now, the fact that our learned attorneys seem to have missed Clause 7 there, totally missed it since 1981, is what leave us one little bit befuddled. Without going through this, because when we done today already, Guatemala claim succession, Belize defense, 1, 2, 3 type, they say acquisitive prescription, historical consolidation, self-determination. Well, guess what? As Mr. Morgan pointed out, those were the same 1, 2, 3 defense that Nigeria had when they went up Cameroon, thinking that for them case is tight, so tight. There's a little catch to this Cameroon situation. Cameroon never used to be one oil exporter, but all of a sudden, after the Bakassi Peninsula fell into their hands, 90% of the oil they export come right there from the Bakassi Peninsula that they just got their hands on since 2008. So now make no ghost fool you. Oil is at the bottom of all of this, as we will see when we proceed, right? So Belize option, ICJ under Article 31.1 with the compromise, as we said, Mr. Morgan did an excellent job pointing it out. We want to give them the option to determine any and all legal claims, to declare the rights, to determine the boundaries. So here's where we say, the UN General Assembly has declared on a matter such as Belize independence and territorial integrity, while the ICJ may subsequently rule to the contrary if given the opportunity. And as Mr. Morgan rightly said, there is no code of international law. And not like the United Nations General Assembly, that the legislative arm that write laws that the ICJ rules on. That is not it. And international law, that one term, I mean, whose international law? It could be Belgium, it could be France, it could be Spain, it could be England, or even America today, you know, since Monroe Doctrine. So, problem with the compromise, Article 2, as we said, giving them this yes vote gives them the authority to take this thing and rule that Belize should cede land. And okay, when no goes full, because I hear Senator Gordon, they create confusion. The Bakassi case again, those people felt that the ICJ didn't have the right to give up Bakassi. And so they challenged the decision in the court. And you know what the judges then said, right? Well, I'm not going to sign on to it. Okay, so you know the ramifications, and the outcome will mandate that those 31 members in the House or 48 or whatever you be after them doing redistricting and, you know, gerrymandering and things, whatever you be, they will have to go there and change the laws of Belize to put the new border where the ICJ said if it go. Article 6, this is my big boy. Ambassador, we need to clear this up for the people of Belize. Need to clear it up. Section 61A. Need to read into this. In the Constitution, 61A2, the powers of the Senate referred to in Section 1 are as follows: authorizing the ratification, including adhesion or accession, of any treaty by the government of Belize, including any treaty for the settlement of the territorial dispute between Belize and Guatemala. Now, you know what they say? Read Article 6. When you have the compromise, read Article 6 for me, please. This special agreement, the compromise, shall enter into force upon the exchange of instruments of ratification. So this document has not entered into force as yet, because only the Guatemalan Congress, after they took it to their constitutional committee to see if everything legal with it, they took it to their Congress and they ratified the document. However, since 2008, we have been calling for this document to be brought to the Senate to be ratified so that we may introduce certain things where we know they may rubber stamp it, but at least it would have been introduced into the public discourse. 1, alternatives, and 2, the monetary compensation option. Because, brothers and sisters, this thing will never be settled with Belize and Guatemala only at the table. We not got the British might. We not got the British might. We can't just walk away from the table every time, walk away from the table every time. Guatemala needs compensation. You know, England had money, and may accept money from England in that time. But because we never get it settled before colonization norms were allowed to lapse monetarily, and now we have taken up the end of the stick nobody like under decolonization, now we are left with the wording in here, not leaving the judges the option to say monetary compensation Guatemala, because you can't expect Belize if you violate Belize territorial integrity. However, you know that monetary compensation may have settled this thing from way back when. Here is one figure that you should work with. That option is not being given to the ICJ judges. All they're being given, if you find any legal claim of Guatemala legit, then just figure out how much rights then got in Belize, and then put what you want to slice this thing. You see, that is all we're heading up to with the ICJ. So I'm saying, we have been calling for this document, which is not legal, to go to the Senate to be ratified, because they have already gone and made one agreement to change the referendum date, and acting like all the Prime Minister and the FM have to do that, go to the House, and after adjournment, Brother Ambassador, because it was after the meeting on the 11th was adjourned, that the PM and the FM casually mentioned, oh, when we signed all these special agreement at Washington last week, Friday. That is not our law. That is not ratification. Now they've done the same thing with the amendment. And gone in the House, oh, we signed all the amendment to the agreement. That doesn't hold. It still is illegal. The instruments of ratification still have not been given to the OAS to make this thing legal. So if we sit there and go and beg for money, for the spend, for discuss something which isn't even legal, leaves me suspect as to why it is they haven't taken it to be ratified when the Guatemalans got it ratified in less than 2 months, because they knew they had negotiated the best deal they could have hoped for, so then run and put it through due process and ratified it. We, on the other hand, after I called them one traitor, which I was the second person to use that term, the foreign minister own law partner through eggs, which the British system there, like the most disgraceful thing you could do, an honorable man, right? Throw tomatoes or egg after the vehicle and things. Sharon Pitts, no less, his law partner through eggs. And niece, no, I never know you to give me a story now, Ambassador. I know that law partner threw eggs at him, but she the one goes tonight like myself, and understood that for 50 years, we have never, ever, ever put the option of ceding land to any arbitration, any negotiation, anything. So she understood this was a severe change in policy, and she opted to call him a traitor. So we're saying, get this thing to the Senate to be ratified ASAP. Let me try to reach my closing quickly. All right, step one, somebody said Senate to be ratified. We know we're not going to kill in at the Senate, but then we have to vote no at the ICJ so that we reach to our next option, which is the UN Security Council, and going through Article 39, which could let Article 41 and 42 kick in, right? A quick scan brings up many cases in which the UN General Assembly reaffirms territorial integrity. Listed below are a few examples of these cases. I'm leaving this presentation. You could follow those links and find everything there about those cases. So I'll close with this. There's a theory called the shock doctrine, based on Milton Friedman's economics. The shock doctrine posits that in periods of disorientation following wars, coups, natural disasters, and economic panics, pro-corporate reformers aggressively push unpopular free market measures. So now we hear the U.S. ambassador to Belize, instead of reprimanding Guatemalan aggressions, joining the UK, Guatemala, OAS, etc., in the chorus of yes to the ICJ. For your information, U.S. Capital Belize Limited owns the license to explore for oil in Block 19 in Belize. U.S. Capital Guatemala, same company, but the Guatemalan registered one owns a license to drill as well from Guatemala for the continuous adjoining block. Do you think it is who gets sovereignty over Toledo district? Of course it does. The Belize has too much rights and wants royalties from the oil. Under the Guatemalan administration you go. That is what is happening. Milton Friedman shock doctrine being implemented in Belize right before very oil. Finally, there's an ongoing conflict between the UN's power proper via its charter and that of the ICJ to determine cases of dispute between nations. It may then boil down to which part serves the best interests of the nation, or more specifically, those that are representing the nation. As I said earlier, land cases with defined boundaries, UN Security Council. Maritime matters, ICJ. Today, in our case, Belize needs to go to the UN Security Council to remove Guatemala from the occupied territories, rivers, and seas, and to stop the threats and aggression towards Belize. After our people taking us down the path to the ICJ with this compromise, not willing to save face on this issue by going to the UN Security Council instead. And so with that, I left as reference the United Nations with its different structure there, and the Article 3 verbatim, 33.1 verbatim, 39, 41, 42. That's it, brothers and sisters. I'll take your questions.